Hello guys, in today's video we are going to take a look at the 1/28 scale John Deere tractor that we got from Alibaba. I think it was definitely from one of the Chinese websites. If you can remember back to the last video, you'll note that the drive motors were causing a lot of problems. They just were creating a lot of noise, and that was causing some problems with our new control boards. So in this video I'm going to show you what I did about that. Well, I definitely spent way too much time on this model. You can see here I was testing the original board out to get an idea of what was happening when that board was driven, and when we look at the trace on the oscilloscope, you can see a big drop in the voltage as the motor starts up. And when we overlay a few markers on the oscilloscope, we can see that it's a 2.88 volt difference, the 2.88 volt drop. And I tried a lot of different things to get this to work. What we're trying to do is get some speed control using one of our new boards, but when you try to do that, the chips that we're using are a lot more sensitive to noise than the simplistic circuit that comes with the actual control board on this model. It was basically just a transistor switching the motor on, whereas we have motor drivers, we have an IC, we have expansion chips, all of which are pretty sensitive to fluctuations in the voltage level. And as soon as these motors start, they create such a draw on the current that they drop the voltage down, and then as they're running, it's such a rough gearbox that there's a constant jitter in the supply voltage, and that has an impact on the ICs that we're working with. Another possibility is also that the motor driver chip that we're using is considerably more efficient than the circuit that was in the other PCB, so that could be a factor. We could be driving the motors harder with our chip than was previously being done, and that would mean that the previous circuit was not generating as much noise because it couldn't drive the motors quite as hard. It also works better with the LiPo than the AAA batteries that came in the model, because the AAA batteries can't deliver the current as fast. So if we were actually using a 7.4 volt LiPo, I'd be fairly confident that we'd have no issues with noise really, because the supply voltage will be so much higher than the level that the ICs require to operate at, that the voltage drop will be highly unlikely to drop below 3.3 volts, whereas at the minute we have batteries that are starting out at only 4 volts. So as soon as there's a big draw on the current, the voltage drops, and it only has around about maybe 1 to 1.5 volts before it starts to impact the IC. So our circuits are designed to operate with the smallest batteries at low powers, whereas this is requiring a lot of power to drive those inefficient motors. I tried a few things to reduce the noise. The main thing I was trying was to get capacitors on the 3.3 volt line, so that when the current draw came, that there was that supply of power available there to make up for the drop in voltage caused by the noise. And I mean a couple of thousand microfarad capacitors, not just small ones. Maybe I could have tried a super capacitor, but I don't have any small enough for to fit in there. I only have quite large ones that you'd use to make like a 12 volt battery, that kind of thing. And while that did help, it didn't help enough. The noise we're seeing here is pretty constant. It's like a sine wave constantly dropping the voltage as the motors are running, and there's a limit to how long your small capacitor storage can make up for that, and it just wasn't enough. If you're trying to reduce noise in something like this, and it wasn't a little model, if it was something that you could use a little bit more space in, the best solution is to provide two completely separate power supplies, one for the ICs and one for the motors. So if you had two batteries, then only one is being affected by the noise. But that's not really realistic here. You're not going to want to be connecting two batteries every time you want to use this thing, especially when those motors are using the power so quickly. You'd be changing batteries all the time. So the best solution I could come up with to solve this problem was simply to limit the maximum speed of the motors. By reducing the maximum current draw, we reduce the noise that we're experiencing, and then we can get our nice speed control but at a slightly reduced speed. But given the size of these wheels, I don't think that's going to be an issue. Here we have our setup with the version 2 controller. I know it's the version 2 because it's using the smaller voltage regulator. It's not the LM1117. We're hooking up the power here. I'm using the AAA batteries that are inside the model. That's the power source that came as standard on the model, and that'll be going through our voltage regulator to give us our 3.3 volts. Here we have our motor control of our drive motors, and as you can see, they're running considerably slower than flat out, but given that it's a tractor, I think that'll be okay. But as you can see, I'm throwing the joystick around here, going from maximum forward to maximum reverse, and nothing is being affected. If I'd done this with an unlimited drive motors, we would have experienced the noise and the signal would have dropped out. But as you can see here, we're having no issues there. The problems with noise never presented on the loader or the trailer for some reason. It was only ever on the drive motor, but limiting the drive motor seems to have solved that problem. Here we have the model just on the ground here so we can test it out. It's still with the slow speed, which seems to have solved our issue of the motors cutting out, but as you can see, it's pretty slow. The other thing that I've noticed while I was doing this little bit of a test, as you drive the vehicle on, I think the batteries are getting hot because there's so much current being drawn to drive these motors, and as they get hot, they start to lose their voltage, and the vehicle starts to go slower and slower until that causes the microcontroller to reset. And that's it, cutting out just there. But other than that, the trailer and the loader, those were working fine. During all the testing, they always worked fine. They never caused the microcontroller to reset. So you can see we can drive that trailer at full speed, no issue. And the clicking you hear there is just the slip clutch. That's there to protect the gearbox. So when you reach the limits of movement, instead of breaking a gear, that little clutch just slips there. So now I have changed the code to extend the limits of the motors. I didn't extend it to full speed. I think I added maybe 20 to the limit variable, but that's enough that it's starting to cut out again. To reset it, I'm just pulling the battery out and pushing it back in again. That's just resetting the microcontroller. And you can see with the trailer and the loader, it works perfectly fine. If you are smooth on the controls, generally it drives around okay as well. But as soon as there's any kind of spike in the load, then you end up with it resetting again. So it's all purely related to those drive motors. They're just far too noisy. I don't think there's any point me going on with any further with this build. We've had multiple issues with this noise and haven't really been able to get a solution apart from replacing the motors, but that wasn't really the point of the video in the first one off. We're never gonna use this model long term. I'll put it up on the eBay site if anyone wants it to try and make their own project out of it. I would recommend, if you were going to do this, that you replace those 2 drive motors with N20 motors. That would immediately solve any issues we've had. I'd also recommend adding a LiPo battery instead of the AAAs, although when you go to the N20 motor you won't have the same current draw. You're only going to be maybe a couple of 100 milliamps at most from the N20 motors. You probably would be fine with the AAAs then, and they would last a hell of a lot longer if they're just driving N20 motors. And the main reason that I wouldn't be going any further with this is I want to get moving on things like the Volvo A40D dump truck. That's been there for years and I haven't never got it finished. The Hitachi ZXS 210, I'd like to get that finished. I've a bunch of right angle N20 motors. They've only really come on eBay recently, but I've got a few of those and I think they're going to help me get that model finished out. And of course the Class Arion, I have to get that finished. That's a great model. The new 3D printer is able to make parts that can really get that project moving now. I've already done a few and recorded a few bits for that, so that will all be coming in the future. And I have a couple of new project ideas, including similar ideas to this one. I have a truck I ordered from AliExpress. It's 1/32 scale, and hopefully it will be an example of something you can do as a starter project. I had thought that this 128 tractor was going to be something you could do, but it turned out to be too difficult. I wouldn't recommend that for a first project. But hopefully this truck that's coming will have a good drive motor and good steering, so that you don't have to worry about the mechanics. You can just focus in on the electronics and do the fun stuff like adding all the LEDs to your truck, because that's really the enjoyable part of it. And it's cheap enough that it doesn't really matter if you make a mistake. It's only going to be a plastic model, I'd imagine. So that's the plan for the future. That's everything for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, don't forget to hit the like button. But that's it, so thanks very much for watching.